Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Thursday, July 16th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington State Government Reporter, and we have a jam-packed episode for you today. District 4, the congressional contest in the Yakima part, central Washington. We have three of the candidates in that contest weighing in. Two Republicans, where there's some infighting over who actually has the endorsement of President Trump. They both claim to, and the leading Democrat who thinks that their infighting is only going to help him, and he expects to potentially rise to the top after the August 4th primary results come in. So that is going to be fun. You'll want to stay tuned for that today. I spent the morning at the Association of Washington Business and Washington Roundtable's Economic Future Solutions Summit down at the Hilton at SeaTac Airport. Fascinating conversations, and the income tax was front and center. Lots of discussion about that. And former Governor Gary Locke was there. He gave me a few minutes after he spoke on the stage and was part of a panel and took some questions from a moderator, but I was able to get some exclusive comments from him, how he feels about the income tax and the newly qualified initiative that potentially could repeal that income tax, coming up in today's episode. Also, Bellevue Chamber CEO Joe Fain had a conversation with him. He took part in that summit today. And then my colleagues Tim Clauser and TJ Martinell talk about Spokane Valley officials moving ahead with an auto row marketing campaign that's going to charge taxpayers to the benefit of Spokane Valley's auto row. If you know that part of the state, you know it's like, say, Fife, Washington, and some parts of Tacoma where it's just wall to wall auto dealerships. Reminds me of Puyallup as well. They bring in a lot of tax revenue. So is it worth the investment of taxpayers, or is this maybe just a buy off of some folks in that industry? So we'll get into that in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Now, when Central Washington voters begin opening their primary ballots, probably this weekend, many of those have arrived in people's mailboxes today because many were mailed out yesterday, others being mailed out today, and tomorrow is the deadline to get primary ballots in the mail. So people are getting those, and they might be confused about who President Trump has actually endorsed in the Congressional District 4 race. This is the seat being vacated by Representative Newhouse. So for the first time in a decade, it's an open primary, if you will, for that seat. And there are a bunch of contenders. Now, in today's episode, we're only focusing on sort of the top three fundraising candidates, two Republicans and one Democrat who've kind of risen to the top and are most likely to end up being two of those three rising to the top after the August 4th primary, which again is a top two vote getters primary. So regardless of party, whoever gets the most votes, the top two vote getters will advance on to the general. So we have Yakima Republican Amanda McKinney and Prosser Republican Jerrod Sessler, both touting endorsements from President Trump. Now, the White House says they want Amanda McKinney, but Sessler says he has his own personal endorsement from President Trump, and he believes that his endorsement means more than hers. Now, both are vying, of course, for Trump supporters in that district and in this August 4th jungle primary. Now, Amanda McKinney, a well-known name in the upper Yakima Valley. She is a Yakima County commissioner. And I spoke with her this week about why she's running and pressed her on the controversy over who really has the Trump endorsement.
I'm the only one with the receipts. When something doesn't pass the sniff test, I think any mom or dad out there who can listen to a story and find out whether or not it's believable, I am deeply humbled and honored to have earned President Trump's endorsement. I'm the only candidate who has his endorsement. He gave it to me on January 6th. It was public. It is in the same fashion as he has made all of his endorsements of every congressional, Senate, and gubernatorial candidate. It has never happened differently. And I'm the only one who has proof of that. And I would simply say that using an autograph as an example or representation of an endorsement doesn't pass a sniff test. But I would encourage everyone to really consider what is fact, what is truth, and what actually, more than anything, what makes sense, what actually makes sense here. The president is incredibly astute at looking into people he's going to endorse and align himself with. And it is very clear, and I've always made it very clear on record, that I did not agree and never did agree with Congressman Newhouse's vote for impeachment. And in the last election, the options were Congressman Newhouse or Jerrod Sessler. And Jerrod Sessler is not someone who is a serious candidate. He is not taken seriously by those people who come across him. And I can tell you that our district deserves a serious candidate representing them in Congress who understands the issues and what is at stake. And I am that candidate. And President Trump saw that. That's why I earned his endorsement all the way back in January on the 6th.
Now, in order to win, candidate McKinney will have to chip away at some of the support that Jerrod Sessler has built over his 5 years as a congressional candidate. Now, he got 46% from voters in 2024, barely losing to the incumbent congressman. And you may recall that Newhouse lost favor with some of the MAGA crowd because he voted for impeachment of President Trump, one of just a handful of Republican Congress members who did so. So he lost a lot of favor with some of the more MAGA crowd in central Washington by doing so. So in a Wednesday interview with me, Jerrod Sessler pointed to his proof of a Trump endorsement. So he said there is a text message that he sent to President Trump that he claims was then printed out and signed by the president December 9th of 2024. And in that text message, Jerrod Sessler was saying, shoot, we came so close. I thought I might, win the seat. I thought I might oust Newhouse, but if I run again, please have my back. I'm a big Trump supporter. I've always been your guy. And on top of that text message, he received something back from the president with the president's signature on top of that message. So Sessler says he believes that to be an endorsement for this next go round for this seat in Congress.
Yeah, it's for me personally, it's not worth it. This thing cost me more than you can imagine, but it is worth it for us as a unified America and for our beautiful state and for all the people that live here. We are getting ripped off by our government, and we need to start electing people who are not building a political resume, but they're actually interested in helping make sure that our government serves us and submits to us, the voters. And so to me, I put my full trust and faith in Jesus, and I believe this is what he's prepared me for the last 57 years to do. And, that's the reason why I'm doing it. I cannot sit on the sidelines and watch our country and our state be destroyed and do nothing about it.
And now West Richland's John Zeller, the sole Democrat in the race. It's a pretty red district, so he knows he's up against it, but he believes that he has momentum in his favor, especially with the two leading Republicans dividing GOP voters for this primary. He says there's no question he's going to advance from the August 4th primary. In fact, he thinks he will be the top vote getter by far. And I spoke with John Zeller earlier today.
One thing is, I got a call the other day from a woman, and next thing you know, she's in my living room and we're talking. And this is a 2-time Trump voter. And she is mad about the Epstein files. For real. I mean, we still have not had, what they did with the Epstein files? They released the names and numbers and personal information of the victims and somehow protected the guilty, the people that were actually doing it. And I mean, I don't know, people are mad about that, mad. Like they were taught that this is a bad thing, and then they were promised that we were going to release all those files, and the files haven't been released. It's really that simple, and people are mad about it. We were also told that we weren't going to have any no more new wars, and here we are in the middle of a war that is causing real damage in this district. Fertilizer costs, fuel costs. Our agriculture people are under fire, and from a labor shock from the immigration, fuel costs, fertilizer costs, input costs on taxes and tariffs. It's like the Trump administration has taken it upon themselves to personally harm the people of this district.
Now, I am told that the White House has issued a cease and desist letter to Jerrod Sessler, basically saying, stop claiming you have the Trump endorsement because Amanda McKinney has it. I've been playing phone tag with the White House today to receive a copy of that letter. I do not yet have that, so I can't provide that proof from the White House for you at this point. And also want to mention there are other candidates in that district for race, but we're only focusing in today's episode in my article as well to be published on our Center Square Washington page today on the top fundraisers, these two Republicans and the one Democrat who is likely to advance after the primary. But check out the District 4 congressional race there in central Washington and at wa.gov for more information on those other candidates. Of course, they're on your primary ballot if you live in that part of the state, and you can also find them in the state voters guide. Now, an exciting day in CTAC today as the Association of Washington Business and Washington Roundtable held their second annual Economic Future Solutions Summit. And so prominent political figures were in attendance, including former Governor Jerrod Locke, who I had a chance to pull aside after he left the stage. And of course, talk of the income tax. And on Thursday, in case you missed it, or rather Wednesday, yesterday, Let's Go Washington's income tax repeal initiative, I-645, was officially certified by Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. So that will be on your November ballot. It had a greater than 82% validity rate when they check a few of those, more than a few, but many of those petition sheets of the 511,000 plus that were submitted, and they're finding a very small rate of voter signatures being invalidated, so they're automatically moving that on to the November ballot. But former Governor Locke, when he was on stage talking, he was very concerned, he said, about the fact that Democrats, especially those crafting the budgets in Olympia, are spending beyond their means, are not working within their budget. He talked a lot about when he was governor of the state of Washington, he really focused on, and he created something called POG, the priorities of government, where he went to all the agency heads and said, okay, what really are your priorities? And he said that was a difficult balance, but you can't be crafting budgets that are spending more than the Economic Revenue Council says you're going to be bringing in, which he said is what they're doing now. And he called that irresponsible. He said, you're never going to bring in enough money to make everybody happy. And you have to learn to say no. So after he got done speaking, he was quick to leave the conference room there at the Hilton at SeaTac. So I chased him out, and he was kind enough to give me a few moments to talk. And here's part of that conversation.
There's no budget discipline. They're taking one-time money and creating permanent programs without any thought as to how are they going to sustain that program when that one-time money goes away, or they're borrowing money from various accounts and not knowing how they're going to pay that back, and then how they're going to sustain that program that they borrowed the money for if and when they return that money back to the original fund. So I think spending is out of control in Olympia. They need much more discipline. They need to set priorities. And when they say that they're going to create a program and they ask the voters to approve of that particular program, they need to make sure that they don't take that money a few years later and spend it on something else, because then the voters lose faith. whether it's with their city government, county government, or state government. Well, already they've committed that source of money to various programs, but they're already facing a budget deficit 2 years from now. So um, what's going on? They say that this was necessary to uh, balance the budget, but even with that money, they're facing a deficit. And will they even be able to use that money for the programs that they've promised the voters?
Now, at that AWB and Washington Roundtable Economic Futures conference today, there were several sessions with various speakers and moderators. And one of those speakers was former lawmaker, now president and CEO of the Bellevue Chamber, Joe Fain. He was up there along with Steve Mullen, former president of the Washington Roundtable, and both of them very critical of the state's overspending and taxes and regulations and driving out business and wealth from the state of Washington. And I caught up with Joe Fain just after he left the stage.
Yeah, I think from a budget and spending standpoint, the most important thing that we need to do is just be honest about what the numbers are. If you look at the last few years of state spending, we always end up in deficit territory. And in large part, it's because we've just got the wrong data that we're relying on going in. Not because we don't have access to the right data, but we're making intentional choices to use the wrong data. We're making intentional choices to assume that our economy is growing faster than our experts at the state are even telling us. We're making the intentional decision to say that we're not going to have any costs associated with things like lawsuits and settlements, because if we have to book those expenses, we can't spend money elsewhere. And the list goes on and on and on about ways that we are being irresponsible and unsustainable in the way that we're building our budgets. If we just fix those things, we won't head back to Olympia every year and need massive tax increases to backfill the budget. And we can actually put our state back on a more sustainable growth, which is also really valuable for the public sector, for the public that relies on public sector services. Stable governance, stable budgets, it helps those people the most. We shouldn't pretend that our regressive tax structure is the perfect tax structure for a state. We should have an honest conversation about that. I do think the massive year-over-year increases, whether it's the capital gains tax at 7.7 and then the 9.9 and then the new millionaires tax or the income tax at 9.9, the thing that concerns me the most is so much, so fast, over such a narrow tax base. We are now balancing the future of our public sector in Washington state off of 9,000 tax returns in a population of over 7 million in our state. 9,000 of the wealthiest, most mobile individuals, and we're putting all of our future bets on their willingness to continue to be here and to continue to earn here, and that they will continue to pay this tax. That is a huge gamble, and it's not a sustainable one. And so wherever folks come down on the regressivity of the state's tax program, or where we might need new revenues for new state spending and new programs that are important, we cannot build a sustainable budget with a house of cards.
Now, I wish I could have had the time to stay for the entire events for AWB and the Washington Roundtable, because there were so many discussions on the agenda for the rest of the day, especially an afternoon discussion with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. It's Noel Frame and Steve Berquist, both Democrats, and Chris Gildon and Ed Orcutt, both Republicans, with a panel moderated this afternoon by Morgan Irwin with AWB. So that's going to be an interesting one. I have no doubt that Morgan Irwin, as moderator, is going to press them about the income tax and about Olympia's insatiable appetite for overspending what we're bringing in, despite record revenue. And so TVW was there. I imagine the entire day's conference is going to be uploaded. I intend to look back at that discussion in particular, as well as others, to bring you for episodes for Friday and Monday on Washington in Focus Daily. Now, Spokane Valley taxpayers learned this week they are subsidizing a nearly $185,000 initiative to drive more traffic toward 10 car dealerships located on Auto Row along Sprague Avenue. If you're familiar with that part of Spokane, you know it's like some other parts of our state, Puyallup and Tacoma's Auto Row and Fife, where it's just dealership after dealership after dealership. It makes sense for them to locate next to one another. So the idea here is, help them out a little bit. But Spokane Valley taxpayers having to pay this, finding out that it's going to this, want to know, okay, are we going to get a bang for our buck? And the marketing campaign apparently took some members of the city council by surprise, with two officials arguing this week that they're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So my colleagues TJ Martinell and Tim Clauser have more on that. Here's part of their podcast.
Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm your host, TJ Martinell. With us is reporter Tim Clauser. And it seems like Spokane Valley taxpayers have been spending almost $200,000 on promoting car dealerships in the city, and the city council didn't even know about it. Tim, how did that happen?
Yeah, so it seemed like most of the city council, or at least some of the city council members, learned about this taxpayer spending during the city council meeting earlier this week. But essentially, the city's economic development director came before them and said, look, we had this money within our budget, so it's not like we were reaching into other accounts to make this happen. But essentially, we've committed about $185,000, a little bit less than that. I think the exact number was like $184,300 or $500, something like that. But towards a marketing campaign for what Spokane Valley calls its Auto Row. So Spokane Valley has a large shopping center. It has 10 car dealerships, and these are regional attractions. People come from the city of Spokane, which has far more people, and the rest of Spokane County to come shop here. So the car dealerships themselves along Auto Road, they make up about 15% of the city's general fund sales tax revenues. So it's a big deal for them. So she saw an opportunity, this economic development director, to sort of expand that revenue. And the way she wanted to do it was by doing this marketing campaign. The thing is that the council didn't really know about it until they came up there. They some of the council members, Al Merkel and Councilmember Michael Kelly, started asking the director some questions about it, and they pretty much just said, look, I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. We didn't realize, we thought this was something that the city was talking about, not something that they were already doing, that taxpayers were already subsidizing. I actually have pulled a clip from the meeting, so we could toss to that here.
You know, Ms. Stripes, you have a lot of passion for this stuff, and I really see the hard work that you've been doing since you've been in the position. You know, obviously, as you well know, Auto Row has been one of the passion points for me as well, and so I appreciate we're thinking about Auto Row. That being said, I spoke to several of the dealers myself in preparation for this meeting, and the feedback that I got was that we are putting the cart before the horse. That the marketing campaign, I didn't know, they didn't know. I talked to them that, you know, I thought that we were talking about we're going to do this, but it's been happening. They had no clue about that because they were very skeptical about the campaign. So that tells me, I mean, dealers are marketing people. They're out there, you know, spending probably more than any other single business in our community spending on marketing. So they're really checked into what's going on. And if they're not hearing anything about this, that tells me that it's probably not hitting it yet. There used to be a council of dealerships that met when more of our dealerships were private organizations. Unfortunately, a lot of our dealerships now are corporate organizations. They're a little harder to get to the table. But I do know that there's some interest among some of the private dealerships and even some of the managers in the corporate dealerships to get that together. I just think that, you know, I mean, it sounds to me like a lot of this has already kind of hit the ground, but my advice, had I have known about this, would have been to not do consultants, not do marketing. First, really focus on getting the dealers together in the same room, talking to the dealers and making that happen. Because out of the ones I talked to, so I talked to about 5, 2 of them knew about the meeting on the 29th. The other 3 didn't know anything about that, hadn't heard anything about that, but they're also sales managers, and it's tough to know what they might know.
Yeah.
But like I say, I think that, you know, just as you pointed out, They don't want to have things done to them or in their name, especially when it comes to expenditures. Most of the dealer employees that I talk to, the primary thing that they said is when the city spends money, we usually end up paying for it one way or another. So we got to be really careful about that.
Yep.
So I guess I would encourage to take a step back, and then, you know, if labor at the staff side without the consultants is an issue, then maybe we should look at some of our council members, you know, to take the wheel on trying to get those auto dealerships together. It's not an easy task, but that's, I think, where we have to start.
Well, I think that one of the questions is this a good use of taxpayer dollars? I understand that, you know, these dealerships bring in tax revenue for the city. It does. I mean, has there been any complaints about how because it's not just going for an industry. Are they promoting very specific businesses, or is it just that row of dealerships? Are they specifically mentioning businesses? Because, I mean, if I had a business in Spokane Valley, I'd be going to them saying, hey, what about mine? I could use some free promotion.
Yeah, and that was a concern that was raised earlier this week. Some of the city council members asked kind of how the campaign was being framed, and the economic development director, she played an advertisement, but she essentially argued, look, we're not trying to market the individual car dealerships. We're trying to market Auto Row. So essentially, she played this ad that says shop at Spokane Valley Auto Row. So they're not trying to advertise any specific dealership, but it does raise concerns. Look, the city, while the car dealerships do provide a significant amount of sales tax revenue, so does the giant mall in the valley in these other centers. So it raises questions as to if they're going to promote this specific industry, why don't they promote others that's also going to potentially increase tax revenue for these other people? But is it worth it? Is it worth it for taxpayers? I mean, in the long run, if the city does see increased sales tax returns, maybe it will be worth it. But will they see more money than they're spending on the campaign? We have yet to know. What we do know is that from when the campaign started in mid-May, and again, it started in mid-May, and the council just learned about it in July, or at least some of the council members. They said that at the car dealerships, there's been a reported increase in foot traffic slightly. Now, this is just anecdotal data that they have at this point, so they don't really have a direct cause and effect correlation yet. But the director said, look, a year from now, that's something that we hope to be able to provide, so we can show, like, look, this ad increased this, and we're seeing revenue because of X and Y. That's upcoming, but there's just still some concerns about how this is all playing out. The city official said, look, we're having a meeting later this month on July 29th with all the car dealerships to kind of talk to them about the campaign and everything. So Councilmember Al Merkel, and he mentioned this in the clip that we played, he went and talked to some of these dealers, and he said a few of them didn't even know that meeting was coming up on July 29th, and they weren't really aware of the campaign. So it just raises questions as to how this is all being managed, whether or not it's going to be effective, especially when a few of the car dealerships hadn't even heard about it yet.
Well, it's certainly an interesting situation, and obviously we appreciate you following this. So listeners can keep up with this story and other stories at thecentersquare.com. I'm your host, TJ Martinell, and thank you for listening to this episode of Washington in Focus.
And Tim Clauser's article on this is now up on our Center Square Washington page. I encourage you to check that out. And for more stories, just like we've been talking about in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, again, check out our Center Square page. And thank you for watching. Really do appreciate it, as always. And enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Hope to see you again on Friday.